In this video, we will show you how to replace your front upper control arm on this Honda Accord. This will be located inside of your front wheel well. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we want to mention is you want to make sure you have your vehicle in a safe area that you will be able to raise and support it. Once you've done so, safely raise your hood. Make your way along the strut tower. You're going to be removing 5 mounting nuts. You'll find that you have 2 12mm nuts and 3 14mm nuts. Do not touch this center nut right here. Inspect the mounting hardware. As you remove it, replace it as necessary. Safely raise and support the front of your vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. Once you've done that, continue on to removing all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. You'll find that the ABS sensor bracket is held in place to the control arm with a 10mm nut. Give that a quick inspection. We will be reusing it. Go ahead and take hold of that bracket. Take it off of the control arm. Use a 32mm to remove your axle nut. Hammer and punch right in the center here. We want to try to get some movement from the axle and the wheel bearing. Now we can continue at that ball joint. Let's start removing the upper ball joint nut, which holds the ball joint to your steering knuckle. On this, you'll find that you have a locking cotter pin. You want to remove that and recycle it. Use a 17mm to remove the nut. Now we'll use a hammer and tap up along the steering knuckle where the ball joint goes down through it. Keep in mind, once this comes down, it could potentially come pulling forward towards you. The next thing we'll have to do is carefully pry down on the control arm. While doing so, it's going to bring the front strut down. While that's down, pull that outward a little bit. There we are. Once you have that separated, the next thing that you will want to pay attention to is the height of your upper control arm. You'll find that it's not sitting all the way down against the strut, and it's also not all the way up. It's essentially right in the middle. That's important to note because once we're putting in the brand new control arm, you want to make sure you have it in the same exact position. We'll continue on with a 14mm swivel socket and an extension. Make our way behind the strut to that 14mm headed bolt. Once we have that on there, we can remove the bolt, and then we'll do the same to the forward bolt as well. Do the same for the forward bolt. While removing this one, make sure that you're holding onto that control arm so it doesn't fall and potentially hurt you. There it is, friends. Let's get ready to install our brand new upper control arm. Take this and put it in position, aligning the mounting bolt holes with the strut tower. Just have to wiggle it around a little bit. Once it's aligned, start in both of your mounting bolts. Make sure you start both of these in by hand before you tighten either of them. While having the upper control arm in the proper positioning, we'll continue on with snugging each one of these 2 bolts, and then we'll torque them to 23 foot-pounds. Let's continue on by carefully lowering the lower control arm down so we can push the strut into its original position in the strut tower. There we are. At this point, we'll continue on. Swing the knuckle up, bring your control arm down, align your ball joint stud, and start on the nut. Snug it up, torque it to 30 foot-pounds, and install your cotter pin. To install your locking cotter pin, you want to pay attention to the slots on the mounting nut and the hole that goes through the ball joint stud. We're going to continue on to aligning the slot on the ball joint nut with the hole that goes through the stud. If it's not aligned properly, continue tightening until the very next slot is aligned. Make sure you peen over the cotter pin so there's no way this nut can loosen up on you while you're driving down the road. Secure your bracket. Tighten your 10mm nut. Now we're only starting these on. We're not going to tighten them yet. The next thing we'll do is apply a thin amount of clean motor oil along the back side or the seating side of the nut. Start that axle nut in place onto your axle, and then you want to make sure that you bottom this out with a ratchet by hand. After you've bottomed out the axle nut by hand, it's going to be time to torque it. What you'll find is when you go to turn this to torque it, it's going to spin the brake rotor on you. You could have a second person inside the vehicle stepping on the brake. That'll hold it still. Or if you're doing it by yourself, just use a pry bar in between the studs diagonally down to the ground. That'll hold this in place, and we can continue torquing this to 134 foot-pounds. After it's torqued, the next thing that you want to do is pay attention to the shaft on the axle. You'll find that it has a small notch in it. You have to use a hammer and punch and drive the axle nut down into this area. That'll lock it in position. Once you've confirmed that that's torqued, we can continue on to reinstalling our wheel. Reinstall your wheel, start on all the lug nuts, and then torque them to 80 foot-pounds. With the wheel on the ground, we'll torque these in a crisscross manner. With the entire weight of the vehicle back on the ground, we're going to continue on inside the engine compartment. Snug each one of your mounting nuts. Now we'll torque the larger nuts to 37 foot-pounds. And the two smaller ones to 16 foot-pounds. Okay, friend, we've got the car back together. At this point, take it for a road test and get yourself a four-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.